Have you ever laid down at night, ready to finally rest, and suddenly your mind starts replaying a conversation from earlier in the day? Maybe it was something small, a comment you made, a moment that felt slightly awkward, a sentence you wish you had worded differently. At the time, the conversation might not have seemed like a big deal, but hours later, when the day is over and everything becomes quiet, your brain decides it wants to revisit that moment. You hear the words again. You imagine what the other person might have meant. You begin thinking about what you should have said instead. And suddenly, you are back inside that conversation, even though it ended hours ago. Your mind replays the scene like a movie clip. Sometimes you imagine better responses. Sometimes you wonder if the other person misunderstood you. Sometimes you worry that you said something wrong. If this happens to you, you are far from alone. Many people experience this exact pattern. And even though it can feel frustrating, there are actually some very understandable reasons why the mind does this. Understanding those reasons can help you approach these moments with a little more patience and a lot less frustration with yourself. One reason your mind replays conversations is because your brain is naturally wired to solve problems. Your brain spends every day analyzing situations and looking for ways to improve future outcomes. It constantly asks questions like, what worked here? What didn't work? What could be done differently next time? This ability helps human beings learn and adapt. It allows us to improve how we interact with others and how we respond to challenges. But sometimes the brain applies that same problem-solving instinct to social interactions. If a conversation felt confusing, uncomfortable, or unfinished, your brain may mark that moment as something that needs further examination. It's almost like your mind places a little mental bookmark on that interaction. Later, when you have time to think, your brain opens that bookmark and starts reviewing the moment again. It examines the words, the tone, the expressions. Your brain is essentially asking, did we handle that well? Is there something we should learn from that moment? The problem is that the brain sometimes keeps searching for answers, even when there are none to find. Human beings are deeply social creatures. For most of human history, survival depended on being accepted within a group. If you were rejected by the people around you, life could become very difficult. Because of that history, the human brain developed a strong sensitivity to social interactions. Your mind pays close attention to how conversations unfold. It watches for signs of approval or disapproval. It listens carefully for tone and emotional cues. So when a conversation feels uncertain, the brain may begin reviewing it later. It wants to understand whether the interaction was positive or negative. It wants to make sure relationships remain stable. This is why people who are especially thoughtful or empathetic often experience these mental replays more frequently. Their brains are highly tuned to emotional signals. They care deeply about how interactions affect others, and that caring sometimes leads the mind to analyze conversations more than necessary. Another reason the mind replays conversations is because many people genuinely want to communicate well. They want their words to reflect their intentions. They want others to understand them clearly. They want their conversations to leave people feeling respected and valued. When a conversation doesn't go exactly as planned, the brain may start rewriting the script. You imagine different responses. You picture how the conversation might have gone if you had chosen slightly different words. You think about the moment where things could have turned out better. This process can feel like the mind is trying to correct something that already happened. But conversations are rarely perfect. Human communication is filled with pauses, misunderstandings, emotions, and unexpected reactions. That is simply part of being human. Conversations that carry emotional weight tend to replay more often. If someone said something that hurt you, your brain may revisit the moment, trying to understand why. If you felt misunderstood, your mind might replay the interaction, hoping to find clarity. If you wish you had defended yourself or spoken up, the brain may imagine how that moment could have unfolded differently. Emotional experiences create stronger memories. Your brain stores those moments with greater intensity, and sometimes that intensity causes the mind to revisit the situation again and again. It's the brain's way of processing feelings that didn't fully settle at the time. Many people notice that their minds replay conversations most often at night. During the day, your attention is pulled in many different directions. You are responding to messages, completing tasks, talking to people, solving problems. Your brain is constantly moving from one responsibility to the next. But when night arrives, something changes. The world becomes quieter. The distractions fade. And suddenly, your mind has space to process everything that happened earlier. Your brain begins reviewing the day, and sometimes the conversations that felt unresolved rise to the surface first. For some people, replaying conversations becomes a habit. Once the brain learns to review interactions this way, it may begin doing it automatically. Even small conversations can trigger the loop. The mind starts asking questions. Then it begins analyzing the situation. Then it imagines alternate outcomes. Before long, the mind is running through the entire scene again. Overthinking works like a treadmill. Your thoughts keep moving, but you're not actually arriving anywhere new. Recognizing this pattern is an important step toward loosening its grip. If you find your mind replaying conversations often, it may help to approach the experience with compassion rather than frustration. People who reflect deeply about conversations are often people who care deeply about others. They value understanding. They want their relationships to be healthy. They want their words to be thoughtful and meaningful. These qualities are not weaknesses. They are signs of an emotional awareness. The goal is not to eliminate reflection entirely. It is simply to recognize when reflection becomes unnecessary repetition. One helpful step is learning to gently interrupt the replay loop. When you notice the conversation returning to your mind again, remind yourself that the moment has already passed. You cannot rewrite what was said, and most of the time, the other person has already moved on. Sometimes the healthiest response is allowing the moment to remain imperfect. Not every conversation needs to be analyzed completely. Not every interaction requires a perfect resolution. Life moves forward through imperfect conversations every day. Your mind replays conversations because it is trying to understand the world around you. It wants clarity. It wants connection. It wants relationships to feel secure. But sometimes the mind simply needs reassurance that it can rest. Not every moment needs to be revisited. Not every conversation needs to be improved. Sometimes peace comes from allowing the past moment to stay in the past and reminding yourself that being human means conversations will never be perfect, and that is completely okay.